Hi, everyone. My name is Garrett Parsons. I'm the Pet Support Director at Found House Interfaith Housing Network in Cincinnati, Ohio. Today, I'm going to be talking about how our pet support program shelters owned animals and how some of our best successes comes from collaborating with social service agencies. So that's going to be kind of the main focus of what we are talking about today. Before we kind of get into that latter part, we're going to talk about what Found House IHN does as a whole. We're going to talk about how the pet support program begun, how it was created, and then we'll move on to some of the nitty-gritty kind of specifics about what it takes to shelter owned animals in this kind of co-sheltering model. A little bit about me. Again, my name is Garrett. I'm a licensed social worker. I've been in Cincinnati for the past 10 years, and I've been with Found House for the last 8. I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio. So let's see. Found House Interfaith Housing Network, we have been a provider of emergency family shelter since 1991, so the last almost 35 years. We have been using a model of sheltering that is consistent with kind of the Family Promise sheltering model or the Interfaith Hospitality Network model, which is the shelter that we used to be, where we actually shelter our families not in our day center, which was the picture of that building in the last slide, but we house our families at different congregations across the Cincinnati area. So for IHN to truly work, we rely on the faith community to use and lend their space and their volunteers to house our families for us at night. During the day, they come back to our day center where we have all of the appropriate facilities for them. About 15 years ago, in addition to emergency shelter, we added on to the programs that we offer to the community by adding housing programs. So we have several housing programs, which includes permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing. We used to have shelter diversion, basically short and long-term housing programs where our case managers work with clients and work towards stability, essentially. The pet support program, now that started 10 years ago. So we've been keeping the entire family together since 2014. And the reason we started the pet support program is because we saw families coming to our front door with animals, dogs, cats, turtles, which were some of the first animals in the program. And we didn't believe that we were truly working with the entire family if we didn't let those animals in. So in 2014, after some grant funding made it possible, we installed kennels and we allowed for families to bring in their animals. We started with 4 dog kennels, 4 cat kennels. The families would take care of the animals during the day in our kennel spaces in our day center. And then at night, when the families would go to the congregations, because they were not allowed to bring their animals there because the congregations had their own rules, the animals would be safe in their kennel. And that's how we became a pet inclusive agency. Now, fast forward, 8 years later to today, where we're sheltering a lot of different animals, that happened really naturally. So we started with those few kennels for families' animals, and we kept getting calls from all of the other homeless shelters in Cincinnati. And of course, we were the first homeless shelter that allowed animals. So we were getting calls from all of these shelters saying, hey, we have clients that are in our shelter, but they have a dog or they have a cat. Can that cat or dog stay with you while that client stays in our shelter and works towards finding housing? Of course, the answer was no at first because we didn't have staffing. We didn't have volunteers. The families in our building were responsible for the care of their animals. But eventually, when I started, we were able to expand our program because the need was there. We wanted to be able to house animals in our existing facilities. All we needed were staff, some volunteers, some good partnerships, and then we would be able to house the animals for any owner in any homeless shelter in the Greater Cincinnati Area, which includes Hamilton County, where our city is located, the surrounding counties, and even on the other side of the Ohio River in northern Kentucky, in those counties as well. We started really small, and I'm going to talk about our numbers later. But again, fast forward, we've been able to grow, and here we are 8 years later, running a shelter, a foster program for animals for owners that are in transition. Now, that is typically an owner that is experiencing homelessness, but we've even expanded to work with owners that are incarcerated, owners that are in rehab or in treatment or some sort of recovery program, and owners that are hospitalized. All of those are reasons why a pet owner might need to surrender their animal in order to engage in services that they need, or a pet owner wouldn't surrender because they can't or they couldn't bear the thought of doing that, and then they don't access the services that they need. So we serve pet owners, essentially low income, high barrier pet owners. And we offer, I said shelter, and here are a couple examples of what our facilities look like. Top picture, you see our examples of our cat kennels. Bottom left, you see some dog kennels. Bottom right, you see an example of our dog yard. So we have 2 dog yards. We've got 4 rooms with dogs, and we've got 3 rooms with cats. So again, we offer shelter and foster care. We also run a small pantry for pet owners in the community that need a little bit of extra help. In terms of food, supplies, we help with access to vaccines. We don't provide them. We don't have any veterinarians on site, but we have a local spay neuter clinic and vaccine clinic that we partner with. So we'll pay for pet owners' vaccinations and other medical needs, depending on the severity of the medical need. It's kind of a slippery slope, and we only have so much funding. We help with access to spay neuter. We pay pet deposits. We do a lot of landlord advocacy, a lot of landlord communication in order to get pet owners into housing. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll do some behavioral consultations. And then, of course, as a social services agency, as social workers, we can make referrals. And we'll talk about that later, too. So when it comes to our approach to sheltering owned animals and working with owners out in the community, I mean, we're a social services agency. We're social workers. We meet the clients where they're at, not where we want them to be. We take a strengths-based approach. We take a housing-first approach. Housing is definitely, the first goal that our pet owners need before they can start working on really any other thing. Strength-based, right? Utilizing what is the client good at? How can we encourage what their strengths are in order to help them get to wherever they want to be? Measuring success, of course, did that family stay together? Did the animal get to go back to the owner? Or is that family system on a way to self-sufficiency? So that's how we measure that. So talking about our numbers over the years, we started in 2015 was before I was there. I think we sheltered maybe 5 families' dogs and 5 family cats. And I think most of those returned to their owner. I'll talk about when they don't return to their owner in a little bit. But you can see we've grown pretty steadily over the years. 2017, there was a really big jump. And that's kind of when we had our volunteers working. That was the first full year that I was employed, the first full calendar year. You see a little bit of a dip in 2020, and then you see us go back up in 2020 or 2021. It goes right back up. And then 2023, we just had our biggest year of dogs. And it was our 3rd biggest of cats. And that's because we had some long timers. And you can see in the dark blue, we also take in other animals. We have snakes right now. We'll take in rabbits. We'll take in turtles. We'll take in fish. We've had birds. Really any pet that a person can have that we can safely shelter here in our building, we're going to do it. So you can see steady growth, and we're really hoping to reach that 100 dogs a year, 100 cats a year. That's where we're headed, and that's a really exciting time. When it comes to our outcomes, so I have a pie chart of 2022 and 2023 outcomes. I've broken it up into a couple different categories. So majority of the time, the owners get their animals back. The animals returned to the owner. So you can see in 2022, that was almost 78%. And then in 2023, we bumped it up to almost 84%. So when they don't return to their owner, there's a couple different things that could happen. And there's reasons for why it happens. That owner could decide to surrender the animal because they have too much going on. They think it's the right decision. They're, for whatever reason, or they secure housing that's not pet inclusive and then are forced to make the decision, do I take the housing or do I surrender my animal? Those are really unfortunate. And of the 9.8% adopted in 2023, I know only 2 of those animals kind of fit that description. So adopted is when the owner surrenders the animal for whatever reason. Abandonment is what it sounds like. The owner doesn't come back. We can't find them. We contact their emergency contact. There's no way of knowing where the owner is. So we have a policy where after so many days, we consider the animal abandoned and we will find that animal a new home. So with any of our animals that are abandoned or need to be adopted, we have amazing rescue partners here in Cincinnati that help us rehome these animals, cats and dogs. Every now and then we've had owners die while the animal has been in our care. So that happened a couple times in 2023. And then we had, I believe, 1 animal die in our care. It was a pre-existing condition that happened in 2023 as well. But certainly the main categories are return to owner, adoption, or abandonment. And any of the animals, unless they are deceased, if they can't go back to their owner, they're adopted into new living homes. In addition to emergency shelter, our housing programs, our pet support program, one thing that we're really proud of that we started doing in January of 2023 was we built our own and manage our own apartment building that we call Melrose Place. So it's a PSH building, meaning that out of all 26 units of affordable apartments, the family or someone in the household has a qualifying disability. So PSH is a long-term housing program. Caseworkers work with the family on that path to self-sufficiency. So a lot of people that are here today probably know what PSH is. One thing that really sets Melrose Place apart, especially because it's affordable housing, is that it's completely pet inclusive. So 2-pet limit, no breed restrictions, no weight limits. And then they have access to the pet support program. If that family is in need of any additional resources or support for their animal, the case managers will fill out a referral form, send it to us, and then we'll work with that family so that they can keep their animal if they're struggling. I think one thing I'll say about Melrose Place is that it's the first building, it's the first housing that we've owned and operated, and it's, we've learned a lot in the last year. But housing is the solution to homelessness, not a homeless shelter. Found House is definitely an agency that is going to be creating more housing in the future. Now, when is still be to be determined, but that's the direction that we're going. So this is the co-sheltering conference. What our program is unique. Not every homeless shelter starts by allowing animals and then starts allowing any other animal from other shelters. It's just how we naturally grew. So I kind of say that it's co-sheltering adjacent. And I also say that because of the way our emergency shelter model, what it looks like and how it works. The fact that the families that are in our building or in our program are only here in the building during the day and then go to different faith communities, so many different communities at night. It makes sense for us, for the animal to be in kennels downstairs as opposed to with the family at all times. The families don't have one room they stay in 24/7, right? They're kind of shifted around a little bit, which is why we try and provide as much hospitality as possible to kind of make up for that shifting, those transitions. But because of the way our shelter model looks, that's just how we've grown. It's been natural to us. Now, when I say client statements, I think, just for what I've observed over the years, there's kind of two main types of client that how they talk about us sheltering their animal. So there are a lot of owners that don't want to be separated from their animal. Happens all the time. It's really common. We get it. The human animal bond is really strong. We don't want them to have to be separate. That's just how our program is structured. They want to be with their animal as much as possible. So we try and allow as many visits as we can feasibly, facilitate what works for our schedule and that client, that pet owner's schedule. Some people don't do well being away from their animals. But I think there's also something to be said for that animal, being in an environment it might not be used to. It's a good socializing opportunity. So there can be some pros to the animals being with us, especially considering we're a pretty low stress shelter. We're not a huge high volume shelter like the county shelter might be. We have a lot of volunteers that provide a lot of attention for the animals. And of course, like I said, the owners can visit while the animal's here. So it ends up being, okay. Now, there are some clients, the exact opposite. They say, I trust that my animal's in a safe place. This allows me to go apply for jobs and look for housing and go into buildings where I couldn't bring my animal. So the animal being here away from the person can sometimes be a benefit to the owner who can go out and do all of these things that if the animal is with them, it might be a little bit more difficult just because our society, especially when it comes to a lower income person navigating all of these resources, is inherently not very pet inclusive. The future of our program is, we're going to keep growing and we're going to be able to keep housing more animals and working with more and more agencies in our community. So kind of the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to talk about when it comes to collaborating with social service agencies. A lot of this is maybe unique to our specific way of running our program, and the fact that we have animals with owners at other agencies as opposed to only animals on site belonging to our agency is, so we became the first homeless services agency to be pet inclusive. There are others. Fortunately, there is a domestic violence shelter on the other side of the river in northern Kentucky that has been in pet inclusive for several years now. our local domestic violence shelter is on its way to being pet inclusive. But when it comes down to it, the other agencies in our community are not. They don't allow animals on site. That kind of makes them not pet inclusive, right? But some might, acknowledge that human animal bond with the clientele that they serve and work towards it. And then there are some that don't. So it's kind of agency wide, but also person to person. So we interact with a lot of social workers and caseworkers that are also, some are pet inclusive or have that kind of like pet inclusive framework ideology, and then some are not. So when it comes to how we guarantee success with our program, we've got to collaborate with our agencies in our community, and that takes a lot of communication. So the buy-in. And I'll give an example. When we have an animal here whose owner is at a different shelter, they're working with a social worker or a caseworker. They might qualify for a housing program at a completely different agency, which some people viewing might be kind of the structure of housing programs in your area. So there's a lot of stakeholders working with this one person. And if we don't communicate and the client doesn't communicate with their providers at the other agencies that animal is part of their family system, then it is very possible that animal is going to be forgotten and housing is going to be secured that is not pet inclusive. So we did all this work to shelter the animal, to keep this family together. And then at the end of the day, they have to go to a lease signing where they find out there's no animal. They're not allowed to have their animal. And that's not acceptable. So we need to be on the same page. And, I say advocacy opportunities because there's plenty, because a lot of people are resistant to this, family system that includes animals. So what we have to constantly do is not only tell the pet owners that we're working with to advocate for themselves. I do tell everyone, like, let your caseworker know that you have the animals, let them know you want to be housed with your animals. If they're not ESAs, which that's a different story, let them know, hey, I need to find an apartment or a house to rent that's going to be pet inclusive. We tell the owners to do that, but then we also reach out to the caseworkers and have as much communication as we can with them. And we actually require a commitment from these agencies. We send over a verification form. We basically say, hey, I need you to sign this form. This form states, and I wish I could show it right here, I don't, but it will be included in the handout section. We ask them to acknowledge that this family includes an animal, and we'll describe the animal, whether it's a dog or a cat or how many. We ask them to acknowledge the fact that families might turn down housing options that don't allow animals because it's part of that, their family system. They have that bond. We ask them to let us know if the landlord requires a pet deposit, something that we can help with. And then we also ask them to let us know if we can be of assistance in advocating for this client with the landlord or any other stakeholder. Last thing that's, again, maybe unique to our program, but maybe there's some overlap with how people qualify for housing programs, is if this client at your shelter, if they qualify for a housing program, we expect that case manager, there's a transition process, there's a referral process, there's another intake process. The animal in that family system, that information needs to go with the rest of the client's information. And a lot of this sounds like a no-brainer thing. It sounds like it should happen, and it doesn't a lot. And that's kind of something that makes my blood really boil. So it just takes nonstop communication, nonstop advocacy. We do trainings. I didn't put this on the slide, but we do trainings with caseworkers out in the community as much as we can. And that's something we've started doing, only in the recent past, and hopefully we'll do more. But it's trainings on what pet inclusive case management looks like, kind of that term that we've coined. What does it look like for there to be a pet inclusive service, a pet support program like ours? How does it interact with all of these other agencies so that our families are not experiencing trauma and their family gets to stay together? Now, some of the benefits. So not every pet owner that we work with is in a shelter or a hospital or a treatment center. Some people are couch surfing. Some people are trying to get into shelter. Some people just decide that shelter is not for them. They still might need somewhere for their animal to go. So we include that population with that description as an eligible person or an eligible family for our program. But when you are But when the family is linked up with a social service agency, there is a shorter length of stay. And they have a caseworker that we can work with and we can all work together. Whereas if the owner is not linked up with this, a shelter or a resource of some sort, a caseworker, then there's not anyone else in that person's network that we can kind of work with. So we kind of take the lead on providing referrals, having a case plan, helping that family get into housing. And that can just sometimes be a little bit longer because, our time is limited. I'll also say that one benefit about our program, and especially as we get the word out about our program, is that sometimes when people call us, it's that first point of contact with the system, right? So someone might be calling us and say, hey, I just got evicted. I need somewhere for my animal to go. I don't know what I'm going to do. That's usually an opportunity that we can have that conversation and say, okay, let's see if we can get the animal into our program, but let's see if we can get you into shelter. Or, do you want to enter shelter? Are there other resources that are going to be good for your family based on your needs, based on what barriers you're facing, or kind of like what you might qualify for? So that is a really big benefit about our program, that we can refer to outside agencies. So, when it comes to co-sheltering, like I said, we're kind of co-sheltering adjacent, but no matter if you're, you work at a homeless shelter, you're a caseworker, a social worker out in the community, you work with street homeless individuals or families, you work for an animal welfare organization, no matter who it is that's watching this right now, I think there were definitely things that you could pull from what we've been talking about. So there's so many different approaches to this type of work. What I've shared in the past, 20 minutes or so is a very unique program that's kind of grown in a unique way, but made sense for us. There's so many other ways to do this type of work. I think when it comes down to it, keeping families together is the absolute number one goal. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Keeping families together and reducing trauma of families needing to separate because of whatever transition or crisis they're in. That's the important thing. I'm also going to upload, you'll see a safety planning document. It's a really good resource to use as a living, working, breathing document for someone to work with a pet owner. It's not something you just hand to them and ask them to fill it out. It's something you do with them, and it asks a bunch of questions. It asks for identifying information of the animal. It's meant to be part of that family's plan to self-sufficiency or stability. But it asks questions like, what are you going to do if your animal has a medical crisis? How is it going to be paid for? Where are you going to go? What if you have to be out of the home for an unplanned period of time or a planned period of time? Who's going to care for the animal? How's it going to get there? I think and I hope that if a document like this is used with a client that's a pet owner, it can really prevent the worst case scenario is the family losing the animal. The person does not need to have all the answers to this document when they're filling it out, but hopefully it gets you thinking and gets to some problem solving of how am I going to navigate all of these resources or navigate different transitions or crises as a pet parent, and how am I going to preserve that bond that they have with that pet. The intersection of human animal welfare is complicated, and everyone needs to work together. So, for co-sheltering or any other similar type of program to work, you need to establish partners and establish connections with the animal welfare community if you're coming from human services, and vice versa. You need to have a veterinarian on board. You need to have someone that you can use as consultations with housing animals or working with people that have animals, as opposed to like an animal welfare perspective of working with animals that aren't owned. So there's a big difference there. Form a coalition if your community is interested in either co-sheltering or working with animals that are owned to prevent them from needing to come into shelter in the first place. Form a coalition on how you could do that. Utilize what resources you have in your community. Utilize the folks that are really interested in this type of work. It can be really interesting. So I think with that, again, like I said, when it comes down to it, here in Cincinnati, we are doing our best to preserve the family bond, keep families together, reduce the trauma of needing to surrender pets, prevent animals from entering our animal shelters that don't need to. And we're still figuring out how it works. And I think we have a pretty strong history and a pretty strong foundation. And I'd like to see us grow and continue to grow, like you saw in our kind of bar graph earlier. But I thank you for watching this. I think there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions either at a later time or in a different type of format. But please take down my information. That's my work cell phone. You've got my email right there. And yeah, again, thanks for attending and have a great rest of the conference.